This week, it's raining, so we're inside. This week, let's use some common sense and talk about the rights of man. Next up, recycled propaganda, pure white low-life scum. Grab a seat at the Middle East dinner table, and from Paris to the globe, climate change can be slowed if we make it so. But first, life is meaningless, like a blank page. So get a brush, a crayon, a pen, and paint your way. Let me be a nihilist for a moment. Let me just pretend that nothing we can do will mend the pain, the strain, the pushback from the end. And even if it did, why bother? Let me just now play on the edge the ledge of logic so prescribed that begs to say it matters what we do and how we live our lives, then fall. Let me dig through trenches up to my elbows, creeping to my mind, dressed in thoughts to make them mine. Time is of no essence, future's but a past left waiting. We are but a point now fading. So we are but pointless in our highs, likewise so our lows. We are but a useless puff of smoke, a shaded silhouette, accidents who cannot get the meaning of the world because it lacks one. Now let me shift this rhyme. Let me stare down, mark a rift with this depressed existentialist, shoot a shot of whiskey. I confess that nihilism simply don't make sense. And I don't simply mean that holding a belief that all is nothing, even your belief, is like a snake biting its own tail, content that it will eat. No, now that I did well pretend, let me now restore amends. With one short question, part suggestion, if life is all meaningless, why not give it some? Who said it must remain this way, stagnant all the same, meaningless, a pointless mess, a static hold on no more hope? Let me ask you this. If you were here alone, would you not see a rose and smile? Would you not build a fort, a castaway like Crusoe, do some art so the stretching void seemed slightly less so? Would you not give a day some special grace, not because it's preordained, but simply because you're here? And why not give this deep abyss a glisten and a sheen? No gods are here, no smoke screens. How dull and droll compared to what you live and see. Accidents of stardust made to think and walk, talk, and then create. The story of our place, a will of wisps of heaven's name, not your life, just rented space. Ugh. But how much more exciting, how much more inviting to make your space, to carve it from a stardust face, smooth and jagged just like you, to smile at the nihilist, likewise so the gods, to acquiesce to nothingness, and from it build a fire. Just because you're here, and from this accidental stardust you evolved a spark to make you, burn you, lift you, build you. You are the creator of your space, a better place, carve and chisel. This is grace. To stand in the abyss, stare down voids, the helpless ploys, and strike the dark to light. To give life meaning where it had none. To live a life because you have one. To give a shit because this is it, and apathy is dull, like shrugging off this chance, this wild happenstance, this one and only time to do something. In this stardust rock face, carving out a better space. From tweets to marching in the streets, this is Act Out. Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. So now that we've mused on the meaningless of life, let's talk about some of that meaning to be placed on our fleeting flickers with this week's Quote of the Day segment. Thomas Paine, activist, author, philosopher, and revolutionary, probably best known for his pamphlet Common Sense, which really should be required reading for every American child, is also the author of several other bold and inspiring pieces, and it is from one of these that I pull this quote. The circumstances of the world are continually changing, and the opinions of men change also. And as government is for the living and not for the dead, it is the living only that has any right in it. That which may be thought right and found convenient in one age may be thought wrong and found inconvenient in another. In such cases, who is to decide, the living or the dead? Paine talks of this political atom, as he calls it, the idea that one human might bind posterity forever to his own decisions, his outline of government or laws. And that's bullshit. And he doesn't quite put it that way, but that's the basic gist. We, the people, is not meant to mean we, the people, for all time. His twist of existentialist realism in remarking that what he thinks as he sits to write may not at all be what we think today. It's up to each generation to decide whether what came before makes sense, whether it's something to build on, scrap, or rework. It's up to us to place new meaning on the ideas of our forefathers and not just blindly accept them because they wrote the groundwork. It's up to us because we are the living. This is our time. And I think that might be a Goonies quote, but this is our time to carve out that space, our time to dictate what place we want to live in, be a part of, and hand off to the next collections of Stardust. And believe me, I do get the irony of agreeing with a man who lived over 200 years ago on the fact that we shouldn't just listen to men who lived 200 years ago. On the other hand, I can say pretty easily that his ideas and even mere vocabulary are better than what you'll find in today's halls of the mighty. His are the kind of ideas that you want to build on, the kind of ideas that you want to highlight in textbooks, but that usually get redacted in textbooks due to his firm stance on the separation of church and state, his existentialist tendencies, and, his capacity for free thought. His ideas are the ones that inspire you to pick up the torch that was left somewhere in the late 60s next to his peace sign and an I am a man poster. These are the ideas that give meaning. Not just to the meaningless blank page, but to the idea that it's not just your right, but your fucking duty to give a shit, to be an active member of your place and time, to not rest on a political atom, to decide for the living because you are the living. So for more brilliant social, political, and philosophical commentary, check out Thomas Paine's works. The aforementioned quote coming from Rights of Man, which, again, would today, based on the changes in our language and the evolution of women's rights, would be called maybe human rights, or perhaps the rights of humankind. Be that as it may, Rights of Man, so far my personal favorite in Paine's collection. Grab a book, a cup of something, and get cozy. From books to art, let's shift now to Recycled Propaganda, a sociopolitical artist out of Las Vegas who uses his succinct graphic commentary to explore a variety of current issues, prompting critical thought in a society drunk on apathy and escaping reality. Take a look.
I was always very conscientious, even in England. Like, I was born and raised in England. I've lived in the States like 3.5 years. Moving here is what made me into sort of like a activist, you could say. And I had sort of a lot of anxiety about like how I'm making the world a better place, and I was gonna, go and join the Peace Corps or do all this cliched stuff. And I sort of took some time off and thought, why don't I use like my own skill sets and my own passion, which is like creating stuff either digitally or like physical art, to sort of make a difference. So that's when them two came together, was sort of as an outlet for my social angst of living in America.
Was there a particular incident that made you turn to activism? You said when you moved to the States, was it just the political culture here, or was there a particular incident?
It wasn't like bam, oh my god, it was like a slow pressure cooker thing. And obviously like there's a stereotype that Americans are very ignorant, but you sort of, all the stereotypes I sort of always take with a pinch of salt, and then you move here and people don't know where any country is or anything going on, and you're like, oh, Israel and Palestine, they're like, what's that? And you're like, it blew me away, that coupled with like the way people eat and just the whole ethos of living, like all this moaning about gas prices, which always blows my mind. Even a lot of pieces I do, like that shelling one back there, I think is like a fairly straightforward rhetoric, even though a lot of it has ambiguity in it. And everyone's like, yeah, that's like how they're killing us with gas prices. And I'm like, no, not really, but go ahead if you want to take that, that's great. But yeah, stuff like that, just a very insular point of view, I guess, to summate all of what I'm trying to say. Once you start not caring or not being involved about stuff around the world, then that just moves to not caring about stuff that happens in the country or in the state or in the city or in your own life. And I think it's just about sort of succumbing to whatever people succumb to instead of like having that thirst for knowledge.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It does, of course, eventually translate to your own community. I'm curious as well because, like the Major League Bullshit piece behind you, do you just have a really good bullshitometer? Because I feel like there are people who watch the news in the US but would never link what's happening to like the capitalism piece behind you. There's no talk about like the real issues. There's no talk about how capitalism is destroying our country and our world. How did you make the step from like watching the news to then saying actually capitalism is fucked?
I think that that's quite a deep question, and I think it comes from just the notion of critically analyzing stuff. And I think for me, I think that started with myself. So like, why do I behave this way? Why do I do these things? And then once you sort of like, and university helps as well. School is very matter of fact. I always used to get in trouble at high school being like pedantic. But then you go to university and they want you to be pedantic because that's the sort of notion of research and stuff. So I think it started with like a self-exploration and questioning, which I think everybody does or should do like in their early 20s. And then that sort of extended because I was in this new environment to the society that I was in. And it's always easier to analyze a society when you're not part of it.
And how does what you've seen here, and how does your art about the U.S. How would you compare the political situation here compared to England?
It's a really divided country, I would say, just like it is here. Like in the last election, you have the socialists still, and you have this new breed of like national party of like extreme, like hateful and racist ideologies, in my opinion, coming through mainly because of like immigration propaganda and everything is somebody else's fault and just stuff like that. Sort of like you have here, maybe less so now. But yeah, I definitely see a lot of things as following the US. That being said, when the English media are commentating on certain things, it's definitely with a British like skew. So whenever they're reporting about, because I watch the English news here sometimes still, whenever they're reporting about like gun violence, they still report on it with the guise of like, these guys are idiots, they still have no gun control. Where so like there's still huge differences, but yeah, it's scary how kind of similar they are.
What is your goal with recycled propaganda? Are you pushing for thought as opposed to, the blind acceptance of propaganda, which is the whole point of propaganda, that people don't question it? Talk a little about what your goals are for recycled propaganda and what you're trying to put out there.
I think you totally hit the nail on the head, and a lot of people sort of get confused about sort of what that means and what it stands for. And it's kind of, to me, you can't teach people what to think. You could have to teach them like how to think. It's about trying to critically analyze any situation. So it's not about teaching you like, okay, GMOs are bad, this is good, and all that. It's about being like, okay, well, why don't you watch a bunch of different stuff, talk to a bunch of different people, make up your own mind. So all of the artwork is sort of directed to a perspective that there is no wrong or right answer. So whenever I do any events and people are like, what does this mean? I'm like, well, what do you think it means? Because that's the beauty of art, is ambiguity. And that's sort of why I've used art, other than like having a background into it, to promote that. Because I feel like the origin of most of the problems are not thinking about it. And it sounds really simple. So then how do you get people to think? Art's a great way to get people to think. And especially ambiguity through art. So when people have to look at it for a second, they're like, what does that mean? Oh, it means this. And then someone else waits for a second, what does that mean? Oh, it means something different. And that's beautiful, because that's life, and we're not all going to agree on stuff, but at least we can ponder it for a second before being like so certain. And here everybody's so confident that they're right and everybody else is wrong. And that's just, I don't know, there's massive levels of cognitive dissonance. How many people would really change their mind about something? How many people do you know that are religious that were raised as a different religion? Like nobody, because nobody really questions much about their environment, including myself. So if we just start to question a little bit about our own environment, about our own country, about our own state, I think art is a good segue into that.
For more on Isaac and his work, check out recycledpropaganda.com. Now let's take a look at this week's vigilante lowlife scum.
You low-life scum.
Writers and social critics like Chris Hedges have warned against the rise of right-wing fascist, racist, vigilante violence for quite some time. And recently, a study by the New America Foundation came out showing that white people are the biggest terror threat in the U.S. The study analyzed 26 attacks on U.S. soil classified as terror attacks and found that 19 of them were carried out by non-Muslims. So who are these non-Muslim groups and individuals? Well, they're right-wing, anti-government, and white supremacist groups. And I guess we might want to even adjust that study to reflect the most recent shooting at a Planned Parenthood in Colorado Springs, where a white man opened fire, leaving 3 dead and 9 injured. Furthermore, according to the Department of Justice statistics, whites are number 1 in pretty much all violence. In 2013, whites led all the other groups in aggravated assault, larceny, theft, arson, weapons carrying, and vandalism. When it comes to sexual assault, white takes the forcible rape cake. Ugh. They are also more likely to kill children, the elderly, family members, their significant others, and even themselves. They commit more sex-related crimes, gang-related crimes, and are more likely to kill at their places of employment. Meanwhile, somehow, blacks are thugs, Muslims are terrorists, Mexicans are rapists, and I'm sure there's plenty wrong with Asians, Native Americans, and other Spanish-speaking nations directly south of us. Obviously, Spain is okay. No. No. Statistically, realistically, no. We are cocooned in this echo chamber of hate and lies telling us that black and brown lives are not only worthless, but they're out to kill us. Meanwhile, in the midst of a Bill O'Reilly rant, someone that looks a lot like him and probably listens to his show shoots someone. And yet, in spite of all this evidence, I'm not going to sit here and say, be afraid of white people, or leave racist, hateful messages for your white neighbors, or tell your kids to avoid white kids at school. Because I know that what low-life scum like these white vigilantes do in the name of being white has nothing to do with me, and I want no part of it. I know that there are millions of amazing white people who fight for peace and justice against the violence of those pieces of shit. I know that telling you to be afraid of whites won't actually do fuck all to mitigate white vigilante violence, and will only serve to add more fear and hate to a cauldron already overflowing with both. At the same time, it is vital that we accept these facts, analyze and understand them, and understand why these are the facts and what we can do to change the trajectory. It's not about fearing white vigilantes, but being aware of the sharp rise in right-wing nutbag extremism. Be aware of it in the midst of this Islamophobia storm, in the midst of this anti-immigrant vortex, in the throes of folk devils trying to pull your attention away. Be aware and do something to stop it. And no, that does not mean grab a gun. Quite the opposite. Grab a book. Knowledge and intelligence are the extremists' kryptonite. Organize and rise up. The right may not know a fact if it bit them in the ass, but they can organize like a goose-stepping flash mob. Instead of infighting about what the eventual compost heap will look like in an egalitarian utopia, organize along the same lines of a common goal and move towards it. Don't get sidetracked by small differences and meaningless tiffs. Don't think that a namaste will save the world, and no, praying is not the answer. Otherwise, this would work. You and I both know that the majority of Muslims aren't terrorists, that most blacks aren't thugs and gangs, that most Hispanics aren't rapists. So it is wildly unacceptable to let that narrative flourish. We, the 99%, the peace-loving majority, know that most whites aren't these guys, so why are we letting them kill in our name? It's our job as the non-assholes of the world to stand up, not just to condemn the acts of ignorance and violence on behalf of our own race or our own belief, but to act on behalf of all races and beliefs, the human fucking race, to crush right-wing extremism and create the dialogue from which information, education, understanding, and peace can grow. On that note, to all the fascist, religious extremist, rebel, flag-waving, right-wing, white, violent nutbags out there, you are 100% pure, unmixed, non-diluted, low-life scum.
You low-life scum.
Now, as I mentioned, education and information are the antidotes to dumb shit extremism. So this Friday, join Code Pink on the front lines for a heaping helping of food, culture, and education. This Friday, Code Pink is encouraging activists across the country to help organize pop-up for peace events in their local communities to talk about the Middle East conflict and the issue of Islamophobia here at home. Based on the Los Angeles Code Pink action taking place on December 4th, these events bring people to an epicenter for vibrant conversation: the dinner table. God damn, that looks good. And encourage cultural understanding and dialogue instead of baseless hate and fear. If you can't do the 4th, but you still want to set the table, so to speak, that's cool too. Dinner is served whenever you want it to be. Code Pink even offers up a sample menu for peace as a conversational icebreaker for discussing peace and actions against war and imperialism. For more information on that, including the details for the LA event, go to codepink.com or codepink.org/pop-up-for-peace with underscores. There it is. Now, as some of you may have heard, this past weekend kicked off the activist response to COP21, the global climate summit in Paris, France. Across the globe, people took to the streets to demand something more than idle fucking chit-chat. And coming up next, check out some images from the Solidarity event here in DC. And for more information on upcoming events or events in your area, check out 350.org. Now, you may have heard that there wasn't a march in Paris on the 29th, which of course seems odd considering that Paris is where the climate talks are taking place. Well, due to the Paris attacks, authorities have decided that Liberté can suck it. Using the attacks on the 13th as an excuse, authorities have cracked down heavily on environmentalist activities, even going so far as to place several activists under house arrest, and banning any public demonstrations and rallies. French authorities claim that this has nothing to do with a crackdown on dissent, but that it has everything to do with ensuring the safety of the people of Paris. Not least of all, those important dignitaries coming to sit around a big table and talk about how to make it look like they give a shit about climate change. Meanwhile, soccer matches, trade fairs, and Christmas markets scheduled to take place during the course of COP21 are untouched by these emergency measures. I mean, it'd be hard to imagine a Christmas market vendor being placed under house arrest. It'd be silly. But these environmentalists, they're fucking dangerous because they might, shift public opinion or make the dignitaries uncomfortable or look like a bunch of old crotchety dipshits out of touch with and out of reach from the realities of planetary destruction. And yet, despite the added hurdles of capitalist-sponsored fear, activists did not and are not backing down. On Sunday, activists, celebrities, and even an emissary from the Pope laid out hundreds and thousands of shoes to represent the canceled climate march and, as organizers remarked, to show the strong resolve of climate activists and the ability to send a clear, strong message even under such verkauft circumstances. Furthermore, you might not have heard about this, not everyone who had planned on marching in Paris on Sunday stayed home and sulked. In fact, about 10,000 people formed a human chain around Place de la République, complete with signs, banners, and inflatable art. They chanted, sang songs, and there was even a brass band in tow. According to activists on the ground, protesters gradually took over the road around Place de la République and then began to march down Avenue de la République, where a line of riot police stood ready to enforce the strict ban on freedoms down such an ironically named street. According to activists, a few gas grenades went off and the riot police pushed forwards, but the crowd remained steady, chanting and singing. While the crowd eventually headed back to the square to continue the event, Danny Shevers, an activist on the ground, remarked, "A few weeks ago, we were expecting hundreds of thousands of people to take part in a legal march in Paris today. This would have been a powerful show of strength from the climate movement. But arguably, what happened today was even more powerful. Thousands of people were willing to risk arrest and police violence in order to demand justice for those most affected by climate change. By seeking to silence political expression, the French government has only succeeded in making it louder." And between the events today in Paris, plus solidarity events from around the globe, I said today, but it was Sunday, plus solidarity events from around the globe, I eagerly await a continued crescendo. So in order to stay tuned on this unfolding climate summit, be sure to tune in right here. As you may have heard, I am headed to Paris to cover the activist response to COP21 with exclusive interviews and coverage on the ground. Due to these daily and ongoing events next week, there won't be a show on Wednesday the 9th. However, airing on Wednesday, December 16th, we will have a Best of Paris edition for you, but in the meantime, be sure to catch all of our reporting as it happens via the usual channels, Occupy.com, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And on that note, I bid you au revoir for now. Thank you so much for watching. Please spread and share this with all of your friends, foes, and people you don't know. And check out the last slide to see the sites that I mentioned in this week's show. There will also be a link to help support Occupy.com and the delicious dissent delivered daily thanks to donations like yours. It is a 501c3 nonprofit, so anything that you can contribute is tax deductible and hugely appreciated. As always, be sure to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. From the rainy Devil's Den, good night and act out.